I wouldn't wish anyone to be in the situation I was in. And yes, don't forget to like it. I never thought my heart could pound so hard that I'd actually hear it in my ears. But that's exactly what happened the night I asked my neighbor to check my blood pressure. I wasn't even sure if I was sick or just nervous. And when she whispered those words, I realized it was something else entirely. My name's Liam Bennett. I'm 28. And to be honest, I'm just a regular guy trying to make it through life. I rent a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, work long shifts at a repair shop, and most days I come home too tired to even cook. Life has been steady, maybe even too steady. I don't drink much, don't party, don't cause trouble. But that night, everything changed over something as ordinary as a cuff on my arm. It started with a dizzy spell. I'd skipped dinner, had too much coffee, and spent hours bent over broken appliances. By the time I got home, my head was spinning and my chest felt tight, panicked. My family has a history of high blood pressure, and the thought crossed my mind that maybe I was next. I didn't have a monitor of my own, but I knew someone who did. Amelia Harper, my neighbor, 47, graceful, sharp-eyed, with a presence that always made people turn when she entered a room. She lived alone ever since her husband passed away a few years ago. We weren't close, not really, but we'd exchanged polite greetings on the porch, short conversations about the weather or the mail. She always carried herself like someone who had seen more than most and survived it. I hesitated outside her door, feeling ridiculous. What kind of man asks his neighbor to check his blood pressure? But the dizziness pushed me forward. When she opened the door, her brows arched in surprise. Liam Bennett, is everything all right? I muttered something about feeling off, about not knowing if I should be worried. She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. Instead, she nodded once, serious, and told me to come inside. Her house smelled faintly of vanilla candles. The kitchen was warm, lit by a small lamp. She brought out a digital monitor and motioned for me to sit. My hands were clammy. I felt like a teenager in the principal's office. She slipped the cuff onto my arm with practiced ease, like she'd done it 100 times before. Relax, she said softly. The more nervous you are, the higher it climbs. I tried, but how could I relax when she was this close? Her perfume was subtle, her hair tied neatly in a low bun, and the glint of a heart-shaped pendant rested just above her collarbone. My pulse jumped the second her fingers brushed my wrist. The machine beeped, numbers flashing. She tilted her head, studying them. Then, leaning closer, her lips curved in the faintest smile, she whispered, "I see it spiked." When I walked in, I froze. My throat tightened. She wasn't teasing Cruey. Her voice carried warmth, almost curiosity, like she wanted to know why I reacted that way. My mind scrambled for excuses. The coffee, the skipped meal, the stress. But we both knew it wasn't just that. She held my gaze a second too long before pressing the button to deflate the cuff. "You're fine," she said, almost casually though her eyes lingered. "Maybe just take it easy for the night." I nodded, but my thoughts were a mess. Was it possible she noticed the way I looked at her? Did she feel it too? That strange spark between two people who shouldn't on paper fit together? When I stood to leave, she touched my arm lightly, steadying me. "Liam Bennett," she said, her tone quieter now. "Don't scare yourself too much. Sometimes it's not the body that races, it's the heart." That line stuck with me long after I stepped out into the cool night air. My dizziness had faded, but my chest still beat too fast. It wasn't sickness, it was her. And for the first time in a long while, I realized my life was about to change in ways I couldn't predict. After that night, I couldn't look at Amelia Harper the same way. Every time I passed her house, I remembered her words. It spiked when I walked in. They replayed in my head like a secret only we shared. I tried to brush it off as harmless teasing, but deep down I knew it wasn't just a joke. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, restless. On my way to work, I saw her watering the flowers by her porch. She wore simple jeans and a white blouse, yet somehow looked as if she had stepped out of a magazine. She raised her hand and smiled when she noticed me. My chest tightened, but this time I forced myself to smile back. At the shop, I couldn't focus. Wrenches slipped from my hands. And my boss caught me staring blankly at the same broken toaster for 10 minutes. "Liam Bennett," he said, "you look like a man with his head in the clouds. Is it a girl?" His laugh rang out before I could deny it. Maybe he wasn't wrong. By the weekend, fate pushed me closer to Amelia Harper again. She was struggling with 2 heavy boxes outside her garage, and I offered to help. "You don't have to," she said, but the relief in her eyes betrayed her words. Inside, I noticed her home was filled with memories, framed photographs, books stacked neatly, and one picture of her and her late husband smiling at some beach. She caught me looking and quickly turned the frame face down on the counter. "Old days," she said softly, then changed the subject. "Could you carry that upstairs?" As I followed her up the narrow staircase, I couldn't ignore the warmth between us. Not the kind that comes from physical closeness, but from something unspoken, like 2 people who were never meant to share a chapter, but somehow found themselves in the same story. Later that evening, while we sat with glasses of iced tea, she told me more about herself. She'd worked as a nurse years ago before switching careers to manage a small accounting office. She confessed she liked the quiet now, the routine, but sometimes, she added, looking at the ceiling, routine feels like a cage. I didn't know what to say, so I laughed nervously. I know a thing or two about cages. Mine just looks like a repair shop full of broken microwaves. She chuckled, and the sound was lighter than I'd ever heard from her. But peace doesn't last long in small neighborhoods. That evening, while I was leaving her place, I ran into Jack Thompson, our local fitness trainer. 35, broad shoulders, the kind of guy who knows everyone's business. He smirked when he saw me walking out of Amelia Harper's door. "Well, well," he said loudly. "Didn't think you had the guts, kid?" I flushed. "It's not what you think." "Oh, sure. Helping the widow with groceries, huh?" His tone dripped with mockery. "Careful or you'll give yourself a heart attack just like her husband." I clenched my fists, but Amelia Harper stepped out onto the porch before I could answer. "That's enough, Thompson," she said firmly. Her eyes were cold in a way I hadn't seen before. He raised his hands in mock surrender and walked away, but not before throwing me a look that said this wasn't over. The walk home that night felt heavier than the boxes I had carried. I knew what was coming. Whispers, jokes, maybe worse. A younger man spending time with an older neighbor. It was going to raise eyebrows. And yet, I couldn't stay away. The more I learned about Amelia Harper, the more I wanted to be near her. She wasn't just beautiful. She was sharp, compassionate, and wounded in ways that made me want to protect her, even if I wasn't sure how. Before I went to bed, I replayed the moment Thompson mocked me. Instead of anger, what I felt most was determination. He could laugh all he wanted. Let the neighbors gossip because for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the cage anymore. I wanted out, and somehow I knew Amelia Harper was the key. Rain has a way of stripping away masks. That evening, when the storm rolled over the neighborhood, I found myself standing on Amelia Harper's porch, drenched to the bone, wondering why I couldn't stay away. It had started simply enough. She'd asked me to help fix a flickering light in her living room. I showed up after work, tools in hand, pretending it was just another favor. But when the rain came crashing down outside, neither of us mentioned the time. Hours slipped by while we talked about music, about the people we used to be, about the lives we thought we'd have but didn't. At some point, she made tea and I watched her move around the kitchen. There was something graceful about her. Even in small gestures, she didn't try to be charming. Yet, every smile, every glance pulled me deeper. I was tightening the last screw on the light fixture when she said quietly, "I don't usually let people in like this." I looked down from the stepladder. "Like what?" "Into my home. Into my world." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, the sound of rain filled the silence between us. I swallowed hard. Maybe I don't usually step into other people's worlds either. We laughed softly, but it wasn't humor. It was nervousness, as if both of us had said more than we intended. Then came the interruption. Old Thomas Reed from across the street knocked on her door, shouting about the power flickering. Amelia Harper answered, and of course he noticed me standing there. "Oh, so that's where our handyman disappears to," he teased, eyes twinkling. His jokes weren't cruel, but they left me shifting awkwardly. Amelia Harper brushed it off with a polite smile, but I caught the flush in her cheeks. When he finally left, she sighed, almost embarrassed. This is what I meant. People always have something to say. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Let them talk. They don't know you like I do. She blinked, caught off guard by the weight in my tone. Then slowly, she reached for my hand. Her touch was tentative at first, as if testing whether I'd pull away. I didn't. Our fingers laced together naturally, like they'd been waiting to. Thunder rumbled. The lights flickered again, and she gave a nervous laugh. Maybe the storm doesn't want us getting too comfortable. When I left later, the rain hadn't let up. She walked me to the door, and as I stepped onto the porch, she hesitated. Then, almost impulsively, she placed her hand on my cheek. Her palm was warm, grounding me as the rain chilled my skin. "Liam Bennett," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "You make me feel alive again." My breath caught. I wanted to say something, anything, but words failed me. All I could do was nod, because in that instant I felt the same. I walked home through the downpour with my heart pounding harder than ever. Not from fear this time, not from dizziness or anxiety, but from the realization that we'd crossed a line that couldn't be erased. It wasn't just neighborly favors anymore. It wasn't just polite conversation. Something had begun between us, fragile yet undeniable. And though I didn't know where it would lead, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let the storm or the neighbors or even my own doubts wash it away. Trouble didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly through whispers, stares, and the smug grin of Jack Thompson. Ever since he saw me leaving Amelia Harper's house, he'd made it his mission to remind me I was stepping into territory he believed was his. One afternoon, I caught him leaning against her porch rail while she watered the flowers. His arms were folded, his smile wide. "Amelia Harper, you need someone who can keep up with you," he said, just loud enough for me to hear from across the street. Then his eyes flicked toward me, a deliberate provocation. I walked over before I even realized it. "Everything all right here?" I asked, my tone tighter than I intended. Thompson chuckled. "Relax, kid. Just making friendly conversation." He patted Amelia Harper's arm, lingering too long before stepping away. I wanted to knock his hand off her, but Amelia Harper's expression stopped me. Calm on the surface, but her eyes warned me not to give him the satisfaction of a scene. That night, she invited me in for dinner. It was simple pasta, salad, a bottle of red wine, but it felt like the most intimate meal I'd ever had. Between bites, she confessed, "Thompson's been hanging around more often. He thinks I owe him my attention because he's convenient." Convenient, I repeated. Close in age, respected in town. The kind of choice people approve of. She looked at me then, her gaze heavy with meaning. "But he doesn't see me." "Not really." I set my fork down, pulse quickening. "And I do." Her silence was answer enough, but the world outside didn't see it that way. A few days later, I overheard whispers at the shop. Customers laughing about the widow and her boy toy neighbor. Stung, though I pretended not to care. By the time I left work, anger simmered under my skin. I found Thompson waiting outside Amelia Harper's gate, arms crossed. "She's wasting her time with you," he said bluntly. "Grow up, Liam Bennett. She needs a man, not a kid still figuring out his life." Something in me snapped. "And what about you? You think she needs a bully who decides what's best for her?" We stood nose to nose, but before fists flew, Amelia Harper's voice cut through the tension. "Enough." She stood on the porch, her face pale but resolute. "This isn't your decision, Thompson. And it isn't the neighbor's either. It's mine." Silence followed. He muttered something under his breath and walked off, his pride wounded, but his threat still lingering in the air. I turned toward Amelia Harper, uncertain, my chest still heaving. "I don't want to make your life harder," I admitted. "If being seen with me is too much." She stepped closer, her hand trembling as it found mine. "No, you listen to me." Her eyes glistened in the fading light. "I've spent years letting others decide what's proper, what's safe, but I'm tired of cages. Tired of living half a life just to make others comfortable. Her voice broke slightly, but her grip on my hand tightened. I want to choose for myself this time, and I choose you. The words hit me harder than any punch Thompson could have thrown. My throat tightened, and before I could speak, she pulled me into an embrace. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but something deeper. A declaration that the world could watch, whisper, and judge, and she would no longer hide. For the first time, I realized the fight wasn't just about us being together. It was about her reclaiming her life and me finding the courage to stand beside her, no matter who tried to tear us apart. The weeks that followed were not easy. Once Amelia Harper made her choice clear, the whispers grew louder. Every trip to the grocery store, every stroll past the cafe, I felt the eyes on us. Some were curious, some judgmental, a few even hostile. Yet Amelia Harper held her head high, and somehow that gave me strength. Jack Thompson didn't vanish. I catch him watching from across the street, jaw tight, pride still wounded, but he never tried confronting me again. Amelia Harper's words on that porch had cut deeper than any argument I could have thrown at him. He had lost, and he knew it. The real battles, though, weren't with him. They were inside Amelia Harper's home late at night when the quiet settled in. She would sit on the couch staring at old photographs of her husband, and I'd see the weight in her eyes. Sometimes I feel guilty, she admitted once, like I'm betraying his memory. I reached for her hand. You're not betraying anyone. You're living. He wouldn't have wanted you to stop. She didn't answer right away, but she squeezed my hand like she wanted to believe me. One evening, after a particularly long day, I knocked on her door. My shirt was damp from the summer heat, my nerves buzzing from the gossip I'd overheard at work. She's too old for him, they'd sneered. It won't last. Their words followed me like shadows. Amelia Harper welcomed me in, her smile soft but tired. Rough day? She asked. I nodded. Sometimes it feels like the whole world's against us. She studied me for a moment, then disappeared into the other room. When she returned, she carried the same blood pressure monitor she'd used that first night. Sit, she said gently. I obeyed, unsure. She slipped the cuff around my arm with the same practiced ease. Her face was calm, her touch steady. When the machine began to hum, she leaned closer, eyes locking with mine. The numbers flashed on the screen, but she didn't look at them. Instead, she smiled faintly and whispered, Your heart is steady now. You know why? I swallowed. Why? Because you're with me. The words sank into me like warmth spreading through my chest. She pressed the button to release the cuff, then rested her hand on my cheek. Let them talk, Liam Bennett. Let them gossip. Let them sneer. They don't know what we have. They don't feel what I feel when I look at you. I covered her hand with mine, holding it there. I don't care about them anymore, I said, my voice low but certain. As long as I have this us, I'll face whatever comes. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw not just strength, but peace. She leaned into me, and I held her close, listening to the quiet rhythm of her breath against the storm still raging outside our walls. The world could keep whispering. Thompson could keep sulking. The neighbors could keep watching from behind their curtains. None of it mattered because in that small kitchen with the glow of the lamp and the echo of her words, I knew the truth. This wasn't just a story about a young man and his older neighbor. It was about finding love where you least expect it, about daring to choose happiness despite the world's opinion. And for me, it all began with a dizzy spell. A cuff on my arm and the whisper of a woman who made my heart race more than any illness ever.